Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. I feel like I could have played the Back to the Future music to start this one off and tried to do impressions of Doc Brown because it kind of feels like we've gone in a time machine, a DeLorean, back to 2021. We're actually rapidly approaching I think it was 72 days. I think we worked out today that June the 7th will be the same amount of time as it took to appoint the wonderful Nuno Espirito Santo. It's a bit different this time. You know, you've got to admit, yes, there's a season being played. Obviously, it happened earlier, the manager leaving this time, but there were some quite good candidates available during the season. But hey, we know where we have to start. Arne Slot. The slot machine is no longer going to be a Tottenham thing. Tottenham slot spur is no longer going to be a thing. Honestly, it's one of those things where you kind of have to laugh about it because otherwise you would probably cry. I literally yesterday, within an hour or two of us finding out the news from the Netherlands, I was actually heading on a train past Northumberland Park and the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I saw it in the distance, and it was one of those where I kind of put a little joke on social media. Something daft, like I was going to pop into the stadium, but they didn't have an available slot, something like that, something silly. And I actually, after I'd hit publish, I was like, "Oh, is it too soon? Where's the Spurs fans' head at?" And thank goodness, all by I think maybe two people that got very angry. I think most fans have kind of got this like gallows humour now, and they're kind of there with me. So Arne Slot, look, I'm, of course I'm gutted. You know what I was saying in my previous videos. He was, for me, he and Nagelsmann. If we weren't going to get Poch as a romantic choice, for me, using my brain rather than my heart, those two players, that sounded very romantic. Those two managers for me were probably the ones that ticked a lot of boxes for me, and I found it quite exciting, or felt they were quite exciting and fitted the role required at Tottenham. And it was fascinating seeing the way it was kind of playing out, because obviously this is one of these where we were naturally more of the news was going to come from the Netherlands side of things and those around him. Because of just the nature of the beast, and obviously the Dutch journalist being so close to him and having a great relationship with him, those who would have known him from AZ and also at Feyenoord. And it was just weird the way it suddenly turned. Literally the night before, Wednesday night, they were coming out of the Netherlands, was that it would all been very, I say positive from a Tottenham point of view, that he'd gone in, his agent had gone into this meeting and told Feyenoord on Wednesday afternoon that he wanted to leave. He was off. He was out. How could they negotiate his exit? Then the next morning, suddenly it comes out, maybe not. Arne Slot staying at Feyenoord. And there were some quotes were very much like, "I want to go nowhere else. This is the place for me." And it was a bit like, you did do a press conference about 24, 48 hours before where you were kind of indicating, look, no, to be fair, as I said, I think in the previous one, he was being as diplomatic as possible, but there was a certain amount of, to the Premier League. Hello. I hope you like me because I like you too. That was creepy. And there was an element of, I think, didn't he say something along the lines of, "If my next job is in the Netherlands, I have failed"? I mean, yeah, you could argue this isn't his next job. This is a continuation of the same job, but it was very much a man who would, you kind of got the impression would be quite happy to go to the Premier League, but it did not happen. Again, this is one of these where you're going to have many different sides shaping that old narrative, my favourite expression, many sides saying different things. Although, to be fair to Spurs, weirdly, and this is where I maybe don't understand it so much, there's not been a lot coming out from within the club about Slot. So you've got to kind of give them that in a way. Can we give credit maybe? But it kind of mainly was coming from the Dutch side that, there was an element of compensation being too high, that Feyenoord were going to ask for something maybe in the region of 20 million, 15, 20 million, which for a guy who I think the clause that he has next summer allows him to go for, is it 5 or 6 million? It's a lot of money, but I will always come back to my point about if you feel that is the right person for your organisation, I don't see why it should be a big quibble that it costs the same as an average player. And yes, people have said to me in terms of assets and players often, I think Guesty said it on our podcast earlier, that players technically are assets that are not expected to decrease in value, whereas managers do. Although I would say Tottenham players often decrease in value. But yeah, I always find that a strange one. There were some kind of suggestions that maybe Slot wanted more control at Tottenham than he was going to get. I'm sure from the Spurs side, if they were to be saying anything, it would be, there's certainly been suggestions, let's put it that way, that maybe it wasn't as far along as but was being reported in the Netherlands. And that perhaps this was another manager, maybe, just suggesting, maybe that was sticking Spurs, or not sticking Spurs' name in there, that's not fair, but wasn't entirely batting away suggestions of a move to Tottenham, because it was helpful in getting himself a much-deserved, I should say, new contract because of what he did at Feyenoord. It is something that, and I'm just saying with Spurs, but it's something that all managers and a lot of managers and players do, is they're not going to, even if there's just a little bit of interest or their agent has suggested there's interest, often, just to kind of a little explainer, sometimes of how the journalism game goes, which is why I always try and do my two-source rule, is that often agents will have a discussion with a club, will put forward their player as a suggestion for maybe they should sign, and then they will say to the media, oh yeah, they're interested in my player. And it may just be that they had a conversation with the club, and the club were like, he's good. No, he's good player. And that's it. It's not actually, they've actually made an inquiry as, or maybe we should go to their club and find out about it. It may just be a polite, decent player you got there. And that's how it all snowballs into this thing. And a fair amount of the time, it's to get themselves a new contract. I mean, even managerial-wise, we saw it with Vincent Kompany. To be fair to him, I don't think he was ever kind of dancing around saying, come and get me Tottenham. But obviously ended up with a new contract out of the speculation around his future. Again, could argue he deserved it fully anyway for what he did with the club. So yeah. Actually, to be fair to Slot, his quotes later, today, that I saw in the Dutch media, which I took down, were actually maybe more revealing, maybe to those who were have been trying to paint it. Look, it could be that Slot rejected Tottenham. That is the one thing that Spurs are very clearly, it is coming out of the club, they were never rejected. That's the only thing, to be fair. I forgot about that. I mean, it's one of those where, of course, people are naturally going to go, well, of course they would say that. They're going to say that when they're rejected. This is the bit where an aggregator takes that Gold says, Spurs say they were not rejected by Slot. There's a lot more to context to it. I'm not going to go down that road. But, his quotes were actually quite interesting, because his quotes today, they said, there were multiple clubs interested, but I spoke with only 2 of them about their projects. No club became serious enough to talk about a transfer, and no club showed their interest to Feyenoord or asked about a transfer fee, which is quite big, because I was discussing this with another journalist earlier at the press conference, and they were saying, what else is he going to say that, Spurs came in, I rejected them. But personally, I don't think he has to admit that. I don't think if you're a manager and, maybe you've got an ego, maybe you want to sell yourself as being, I was in demand, but I signed here kind of thing. You don't have to say, well, no one actually was that interested enough to probably make a bid for me. I actually think for me, and having spoken to a lot of Dutch people over the years in the game, they're quite honest people on the whole, in terms of the media as well, sometimes brutally honest. I don't know. I personally would probably take quite a lot from that maybe he was one of the ones, well, certainly we know he was one of the ones that it wasn't, that was in Tottenham's thoughts, but just didn't materialise any further than that for one reason or another. And that's essentially what he's saying there. And it may be because they got a sense that he wasn't fully into it. It may be The other reasons we've mentioned. One other thing I was thinking of, maybe it's because the final general manager, Dennis Teclosa, I don't know if I pronounced that right, he claimed earlier in the week that he rejected an offer from Spurs. So maybe as a joint package of him as the director of football and Slot as the manager, head coach, maybe that was something that was more appealing. Is that something that appeals to you? What's that from? Is that Entourage? I think that's Entourage. Is that something I can interest you in? Martin Landau's character. God, that's a blast from the past. Yeah. So maybe it was maybe Slot would have been more interested had it been a double deal for the two of them. Maybe Spurs would have been more interested if it had been a double deal, because I guess Teclosa did a great job as well within the final rebuild of bringing in really good players. They lost some real star players, and he brought in some terrific players, including Jimenez up front, who's had a terrific season. So yeah, maybe it's one of those where we could go back and forth all day on how it happened, why it happened, what we think happened, but ultimately it didn't happen. That's the end of the day. That's the be all and end all. Yeah, it's disappointing because I did see him as a really good fit. Am I devastated? Probably not. It's not the most gutting news I've ever heard in my life when it comes to Tottenham, because Tottenham have done a lot of daft things over the years that have annoyed me far more than this. But you just have to hope that there's a better reason at the end of it all, a better end to this journey than, I hate to bash him so much, but Nuno Espirito Santo, because 2021, that was where we ended up. I will maintain this, and I said this on the podcast this morning with Guesty. I'm more confident about the range of candidates this time than I was in 2021. In 2021, I was seriously looking around thinking, ooh, it really feels like we're kind of scraping the barrel now. And then it ended up with Nuno. It's like, yep, they very much did some scraping. Whereas this year, I feel like there's enough decent candidates there. I'm sorry if I've said this before. I think I probably have. But I do feel there's a nice varied range of candidates. I still kind of have this feeling, and this is just me personally, I'm not saying this is what Spurs are looking for, that kind of seems to be what they are looking for. A younger, it doesn't have to be age actually, young doesn't have to be young. It means more for me, I'd like someone in the earlier stages of their managerial career. Yes, I know that does lend itself to a younger person, but someone that can grow with the club, someone that really wants to be at Tottenham, and someone that has this identity and philosophy of really exciting, attractive to watch football, and wants to build a legacy at Tottenham. That's the kind of manager I want, personally. It doesn't really matter what I want, but that's what I would go for. I mean, we said it in the last one, Daniel Levy's message about bringing the football the fans love. You know, that's why I think Slot ticked a big box. Look, it doesn't make much more sense than going back for Julian Nagelsmann. It doesn't. I would say at this point, even as stupid as Tottenham are going to look for having kind of had all this stuff come out from within the club about him not being a candidate and having no desire to meet him or an intention to meet him, and now we're in the future. Come on. He's the best candidate out there. Of course he is. He is. There's no dancing around this. He is the best candidate out there by, let's be honest, by a country mile in terms of he's available. He would cost them, at this point, a reduced fee because I think he probably is still on gardening leave, I think. But it wouldn't be like an astronomical, even if it was a big fee. If he's the right man, he's the right man. He's a very tactically intelligent guy. He would excite the fan base, I think, the majority of them. I think he would excite a lot of the players as well. And I still keep, in my mind, going back to this idea that what if a director of football came in that was really, like, he appreciated and wanted him? With Spurs going, oh no, sorry, we can't do that because we've kind of made it clear we weren't going to go for him. It's like, surely you're just going to go for him because he would be the best candidate. Honestly, you can see the Nagelsmann one frustrates me more than the Slot stuff because I don't get it. I just absolutely don't get it. Look, again, it could be that Nagelsmann himself was not sold on it. But if you believe what's coming out of Germany, the suggestions more were that he was concerned about the lack of the structure because nothing was in place yet. Which again lends itself to why was this early desperate need to shape the narrative from Spurs? I don't get it. The weird thing was thinking about it. If Arne Slot, if there was a feeling, let's say, that he was maybe looking for another contract, why was he not the one that maybe there were kind of noises came out about? Oh no, I don't think he's really the one. It's almost like, why did you do it to Nagelsmann? I can't get my head around a lot of things they do. I am starting to come round to the idea now. I think previously I was just like, get a head coach and get a manager and get that sorted. I'm now maybe starting to veer back to okay, if you're going to rule out the two top ones for me, candidates for the job, maybe now make sure you get that director of football in and then get someone that they want to work with and know inside out really well, and then create the club around them. Get two like-minded people that really want the best for the club and the best football for the club as well. And if that ends up with Nagelsmann, hey, I don't know. But yeah, I'm starting to think that, although I know that lengthens the process and people get more annoyed, I guess weirdly, because we started this earlier, although it will feel later, there's actually more of the close season to work with. I do get the impression within Spurs that they want these things sorted out as soon as possible to give clarity to everything. Because even transfers, we're going to talk about that in a bit. I asked Ryan Mason about that in his presser. And there is a need to have clarity to then be able to know who you're going to go out and buy. Because this is what makes me chuckle when I see foreign media saying Spurs are looking to rival blah blah for a bid, are about to make a bid for blah blah next week. No. Spurs have to have a director of football first that can identify players they want. Secondly, they have to have a head coach who will or won't want the players and has a certain system of formation. I'm sorry, I don't want to be too critical of other media because we all make mistakes and I make them as well. But if you're going to link players with a club that has not even a manager, sometimes clubs do strangely buy players when they don't have a manager, which is madness. Well, I guess it's not as much madness when you have a very set philosophy and an idea of how your teams are going to play football and you hire coaches. Like, say, Brighton, like Swansea had that idea of doing things as well. So, yeah, maybe it makes sense that. But when you don't have a director of football, then it's absolutely ridiculous to kind of even link them with any players right now. Which is why you'll probably see a lot of us journalists are not writing transfer stories in England. There's no point. We're fully aware of this. But yeah, we'll see. Probably for me, if you're going to pin me down and ask me which is your next kind of choice as a young kind of project manager type, probably veering, if they're not going to go back for Nagelsmann, I'm probably veering towards Ruben Amorim because I think there's a lot of plus sides to him. Different formation, you're looking at a back three then, but I do like the cut of his jib. If you'll pardon the old expression, I like the way he talks. I've been in a couple of his press conferences. I really like the way it talks about the game, explains the game, the way he feels the game, loves the game, and wants it to be played. And he's obviously a man that's very good with young players as well. And that's, I'm kind of that mind. I've watched a hell of a lot of academy football, and I like teams that are kind of a younger base to them, that energy, kind of that high pressing style that I think you need younger players as well to really kind of bed in. Not necessarily always, but I do think it helps. I think you'll see a lot of maybe the pressing sides out there are kind of have that younger base. It's just the style of football I like, to be honest with you. But yeah, Amorim is one that I think I'm probably veering towards next next on the list. Guesty put an incredibly impassioned defence for Andrzej Postecoglou today. If you don't listen to our podcast, this is why, again, because people don't always asking, can you do an audio, can you do a podcast version of this? It's probably just not to look at this, and I understand that. But it's mainly because I don't want to essentially compete with myself and Guesty's podcast, which is Golden Guest Talk Tottenham. It's across all podcast platforms. You can find it. We record it once every week, sometimes twice if it's a really manic week, but mostly once a week. And today's one, honestly, have a listen to it. If I was Andrzej Postecoglou, sorry for pronunciation, I can't even pronounce pronunciation. It's been a long day. If I was Postecoglou and I was going to court, I would want Rob Guest to defend me in court, because honestly, he almost converted me, and I'm not entirely sold on Postecoglou as not as a manager. I think he's done a good job at Celtic, but as the right fit for Spurs right now. And Guesty did a great job. He was talking about his philosophy, the way he deals with players. It was very interesting. Honestly, listen to it. You can see he's done a fair bit of research into it. And I noticed Sky Sports did an interview with him today as well, where it was that classic manager kind of concentrating on the here and now, not batting anything away, but also, it wasn't really batting anything away, but also not really encouraging it at the same time. Just keeping that kind of middle ground, just to kind of keep everyone on edge, I guess. Obviously, the Postecoglou, there is the link with Scott Munn, knows him well, back in Melbourne. So he is someone he knows. For me, and this could be, you're quite right to say this is hypocritical when I wanted Slot, but my feeling with Postecoglou is that I just think experience-wise, his main success for me, obviously in this kind of side of the world, although Australia isn't this side of the world, has obviously been national manager of Australia, and also what he's done at Celtic. And what he's done at both has been excellent, as Guesty told me. Rangers were a hell of a long way ahead, won the season in the season before he came. I think it's about 25 points. And the next season, he turned everything around and brought Celtic back. For me, I just don't know. I know he's 57. There's a lot of experience there. But I just personally wonder whether his next step would be a team lower down the Premier League rather than jumping. And I know Spurs are lower down the Premier League than they have been, which is very sad. But I just kind of maybe feel for him, maybe it needs another step in between first, if you know what I mean. And again, you're quite right to say it's hypocritical, and Slot maybe, Eredivisie, Scottish Premiership. I don't know where people see them in terms of the levels. For me, what I would say about what Slot did with Feyenoord is that Feyenoord, although previously a kind of a big power in Dutch football, I think they've only won Eredivisie twice this century, the last 23 years, and that being the second time. Was it the second time? Third time? But either way, he's kind of brought them, kind of awakened a sleeping giant, I guess is the way to put it. Whereas for no disrespect to Postecoglou, but Celtic and Rangers, especially now Rangers are back fully in the top flight, they're the two that you're going to look at as your title winners. So, yeah, I don't want to do it down too much, because from what I'm told, the football's great. My only argument against that would be, how much defending do you have to do in the Scottish League? Half of my family are from Scotland, so I really don't want to do down Scottish football too much. But it just, for some reason, Postecoglou, it doesn't quite hit all the right notes for me. As I've said with anyone in this process, if he ends up becoming Spurs manager, I will absolutely look at it a fresh slate. But for me, he's not one that was that really thrills me. Let's put it that way. I was looking at some of the other managers that have been linked with it, and I'd put Brendan Rodgers in the same category. Again, I don't think he would do a bad job at all. I think Brendan Rodgers would probably know certainly how to get a tune out of certain Spurs players, and obviously he's won a silverware in recent years as well, which is something Spurs haven't done. But again, he just maybe doesn't excite me at all, and he just feels like a name that's always linked with Spurs. I just don't see that as being a particularly likely candidate myself. That's just my thinking, everything I've heard and around the situation. Graham Potter be an interesting one. Probably if you're going to push me, weirdly, people might think I probably would prefer Potter over Rodgers, purely because I think there's a lot for Potter to prove again now. Whereas yeah, although you could argue that Chelsea haven't really got any better since he left. So, but I still think, yeah, maybe more so because everyone will now be looking at what De Zerbi's done at Brighton and think, well, actually, was it that great what Potter did? Has De Zerbi actually perfected and made it better? Which I guess technically kind of has. Got Luis Enrique. You know my thoughts on Luis Enrique. Very decorated, successful manager. Just doesn't float my boat. I'm not a massive fan of football. It kind of goes to the other extreme of passing people to death. Yeah, we might talk very briefly about Luis Enrique again in a little bit when I cover another subject. The interesting one that maybe, you look at Julian Lopetegui. Lopetegui, I think I was told that's how it's pronounced today. It seems to be a little kind of uncertainty over whether he's going to remain at Wolves or not and what's exactly happening there financially, whether they can do a lot of the things I think they wanted to do for him this summer. Maybe it'll be an interesting one. Strange stuff happening at Napoli as well. Spalletti. There's a real kind of possibility that Spalletti heads off after bringing Napoli their first Scudetto in 33 years. Spalletti would be an interesting one. Obviously, very successful right now as well. Whether he comes into the picture with the length of time it's taking Spurs to do this. I mentioned De Zerbi already. I think De Zerbi would be excellent. I think he'd be a bit crazy behind the scenes. I don't know whether Spurs would want to jump into that again. A slightly very passionate Italian again. I would like him a lot, but yeah, I don't know. If I'm him, why in the world would I want to leave Brighton? That's what I can't understand. They've got themselves Europa League football next season, had a brilliant season. They can build in it. Yes, they'll sell some players, but as they always do, they'll buy really well. I think De Zerbi's got a great project there. I would not be leaving it this quickly if I was him. I saw another one linked yesterday. I'm sorry to laugh. It's only because of his name. It's Vincenzo Italiano, who's the Fiorentina boss, who's had a very good season as well. They've done very well under him. I just love the fact his name's Italiano. He actually was born in Germany. He's not Germano. But to be fair, he was only there for 6 months. I think his Italian parents brought him back very quickly after he was born. But yeah, there's so many candidates out there. There are, like I said, there's a lot of decent candidates as well. There's a lot of candidates, but there's a lot of ones that I do think could make an impact for Spurs. I think we're all just desperate now to have someone come in and shape an identity, shape a philosophy. And I said it in the last video, and I was really interested to see a lot of the comments, and mainly people were very much for it, that you'd maybe accept them stepping back or just having a mediocre league position if you could feel that there was improvements happening and a philosophy was being put in place. And do you know what? That was actually quite heartwarming, because my day is spent looking at social media, which, oh my goodness, there's so many fans of all football clubs, don't get me wrong, but also in Spurs, there's a lot of impatience, which is understandable with the frustration that's been caused by this club and the way it's run. But there's a lot of people I don't feel on social media would give a manager that kind of time. And, Spurs is a club, and the board as well, don't get me wrong, but the board is, the club is, you take out Poch's 5.5 years, and you're looking at a club that's probably got a manager, an average lifespan of about, or, you know what I mean, lifespan, they don't die, of, 2.5 seasons, which is pathetic. So we do, fans, journalists, board, everyone does need to just give someone a proper chance to put in their philosophy. And, some people feel that they can come in and instantly change it. I think if any club has proved that you can't come in instantly and change it, regardless of how respected a manager you are, it's Tottenham Hotspur. I'd love to see someone given a little bit of time. And I'm intrigued to see where this process goes, because I do understand that Daniel Levy has probably been leaning on a lot of experienced people within the game. And that's people kind of within clubs, people within agencies that he knows, and just highly respected football people around the world in different countries as well. Just to kind of seek advice and there's two sides to look at this. I know some people are going to see that as, well, why do you need advice if you're the highest paid chairman or whatever it is in the league? And I get that point of view, but then also we also all criticise Levy for his football decisions. So if he's actually getting advice from people within football about making decisions, maybe that's not a bad thing. Because we spoke about last week or in the last video about, being someone that maybe steps back and looks at the business, branding, marketing, whatever you want to call it, financial side of the club, and let someone actually make the football decision. But that should seem to be Scott Munn coming in to do that. So yeah, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, and I'm intrigued to see, or whether we end up finding out, or whether it has happened, or whether it will happen, because whether he goes and gets some advice from Fabio Paratici, whether there is still some kind of line between them. Because the reason I say this is because I was looking into the aspects of, if you weren't aware, that FIFA actually reduced partially Paratici's global ban element of the one that he got from Italy, in that he can now carry out some kind of, I think it was organisational, I'm trying to remember the exact wording, football-related activities. So technically, going back and getting some advice from him maybe is a thing that could professionally, legally, I don't know how you put it, be done. I think aesthetically, it's a horrible look. It's a really bad look. Because with no disrespect intended to Fabio Paratici, regardless of innocence, whatever, there is so much noise around him right now. That Italian ban still stands. There is another case coming up in Italy about salary adjustments, which he has been very much heavily, he's going to be involved in this case. There's a UEFA investigation from an independent body that is still, I think, on its way as well. So if I'm Tottenham, and I'm Daniel Levy, if that phone call rings and it says Fabio on it, yeah, just maybe put that to voicemail. Screen that call. But maybe they have chatted. I don't know. I'm sure if they have, it will get out there. If there's an involvement at all with Paratici still, it's yeah. Look, I tell you what, the best way is if Spurs appoint Luis Enrique, Fabio Paratici has definitely had a word. Spurs might argue, yeah, but he said that before he left. Because I know you've heard me say this before. Fabio Paratici adores Luis Enrique. He likes Enrique, he likes De Zerbi, and he really likes Sergio Conceição as well at Porto. So if any of those three get in there, then you can go, Fabio Paratici, the puppet master, still pulling the strings. Just a joke, but you know what I mean. Yeah. I don't want Luis Enrique. I don't. Again, fresh. If he did come in, fresh slate, all of that. Interestingly, the Napoli job, if Spalletti does go, Conte and Luis Enrique have been heavily linked in Italy with that. There's a part of me that would really like Luis Enrique to get it so he doesn't end up being Spurs manager, which that sounds really strong. That's going to be one of those where if he comes in and does a brilliant job, then everyone quite rightly goes, you muppet, do you remember saying this? And I will absolutely eat humble pie. I just think just at the point where I don't want another glamour appointment. I don't want the third in the trilogy. The Mourinho, Conte would be Luis Enrique. I want someone that fits what Spurs are trying to do, rather than just like, oh, I've heard of him. And I still am not entirely sold on how well he's done outside of Spain and La Liga. He did very, very well there, don't get me wrong. But yeah, we'll see. We shall see. Sorry, I thought I just got a message there, but I didn't. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see where it all goes. There's so many candidates. I don't think I mentioned Gallardo out there, did I? I've mentioned him before. He again is one of those that's a little bit of a gamble for anyone in Europe that gives him his first job over there. You're not entirely sure how it's going to go with him and how it happens. And I guess he's, from what I understand, is another character. Let's put it that way. So. Yeah, we'll see. But like I say, there are quite a few decent candidates out there, which is why I'm less worried at this point. Who knows where it ends up going, but at this point, I'm less worried. which means it's all going to go to hell, doesn't it? Yeah, but just so much needs to be done at Spurs. It's such a big summer. How many times have we said that? I think, from what I understand, it feels like there's a real need to concentrate on changing the culture within the club, which has obviously, well, you've heard Kane said it, Mason say it. It really kind of, the values have dropped. Just rediscover that identity with how close they were with the fans during the Pochettino peak era. You know, I know there's a lot of people saying, "Well, just hire Poch." But definitely, you know, you'll remember it. I remember it. How brilliant it was during those. We talk about patience. Everyone had patience then because we could kind of see what Poch was doing and where he was taking the team. And you know that. I always go back to sitting in the press box. I was so privileged to be there for the finale at White Hart Lane and watching the legends come out onto the pitch. But the current squad and Poch came out, and it was almost like they'd become legends themselves. The reception for them was pretty much as good as it was for the legends, which is, you know, they're being heard of now. I mean, look at the lap of honour the other day, of appreciation, whatever you want to call it, walk of shame. It was... You know, it's light years away from then. And Poch having tears in his eyes. And I don't think we've ever felt that connected and close as we did back then. And that's what I think the club are striving to try to get back to from this summer onwards. But they've got to make the right decision. Daniel Levy has to make the right decision. He has to appoint people that, I don't want to say don't really care about the club, because that would be indicating that others didn't. But have a real connection with the club. And see it as their long-term goal to make Tottenham Hotspur a real power, a super presence within the game. Because, you know, I saw the Mourinho quotes, and I don't think there's anything unfair about them. He said in his interview in a press conference with Roma about saying Spurs is the one club he never really felt in his career had a connection with, despite, you know, after working there. He said just maybe it was because of the COVID era and not having fans in the stadium, and maybe it was because, you know, in his words, Mr. Levy didn't give me the final that I had got to try and win a trophy. I can't argue with him with that. I don't think you can hold it against him that he didn't ever really build that connection with the club. Because all of the above, what you said, I don't think that's too much wrong with it. But would I say that Jose Mourinho came in as someone that I felt was going to be there for, you know, wanted to build a real legacy and wanted to be like what Klopp has done at Liverpool, what Guardiola has now done at City? I know different projects, but you know what I mean. Someone that wants to be there for the long term. No, I didn't feel that with Mourinho, and I didn't ever feel that with Conte. Even from the first day, I didn't feel that with Conte. But that's what I want now, and I think I get the impression that's what the club would like, but they need to make these right decisions to get someone like that as well. And those I've spoken to in and around Spurs have really spoken for a need for improvement and investment in like really key modern areas like the data side of things. From what I understand, I think there's a really good bunch of data analysis there, but they need the improvement in the data that they're analysing. And also the medical department, from what I understand, that's another area that needs... And that, from what I think that is going to be concentrated. Naturally, a new director of football, if they have got anything about them, they're going to come in and see the areas like Paratici did to begin with, appraise the areas, see where more funds need to be directed, and you go for it. The academy, you know, increasing their wage structure to be able to not only attract players from other clubs, young players from other clubs, but also keep the ones you've got. Because sometimes if you can't show them there's an immediate pathway, I know it's a cynical thing to say, but sometimes that little bit extra money just helps. And that was something Paratici was trying to do. He had started to increase the wage structure, but it is something that needs to be kind of built on even more. I don't get the impression, from what I'm told, that the academy is one of the better funded ones out there in the Premier League. I think there's a lot more sides that are kind of better funded in that respect, and the proper investment leads to proper success, I feel, and that includes at academy level as well. I know they've had an incredible season, you know, the under-17s, under-18s, obviously, unfortunately, the under-21s as well, and some of the younger age groups have had a lot of success as well, but you've got to give them every opportunity they can rather than trying to punch above their weight as well. So I'll be intrigued to see what happens with that as well. Yeah. Get that director of football in though. Get that. That's the one where I think I said this. I don't know if it was in the podcast or my last video. I just feel with the director of football, suddenly it's going to be like that. There's going to be someone that maybe comes out of nowhere or is a name that hadn't been talked up as much in the past, and suddenly bang, they're in, and it moves very quickly and it all happens. That's kind of my feeling on that. Or maybe it's just hope. I don't know. But yeah, lots to happen. And we had the press conference today with Ryan Mason, who spoke very well. I get the sense that Ryan Mason is probably now fully aware that he's unlikely to get the job, mainly because of the results, although we had a bit of a chat about that as well. But I thought he spoke really well. Last week, if I was going to be a bit critical about his press conference last week, I almost felt he was going through the motions a bit. A few of us afterwards were a bit like, oh, crikey, if Ryan Mason gets the job, this is kind of what we're going to have every week. And I kind of feel like this time he came in quite fired up, very passionate, but also very intelligent the way he spoke. If I got a real sense of what he would be like in an interview going for jobs for next season. I really can see how very convincing he'll be, and very much how he has very strong beliefs in the way the game should be played, but also very strong confidence in himself and the coaches that work around him as well. So, yeah, I really still hope a Spurs manager for the future. I really can see that, I think. It's just what comes in between, as we see with a lot of these managers that you kind of hope end up coming back to their club one day, their boyhood club. Just quickly, before the press conference, there was only a few of us there. It was quite early on. It was a really nice moment. Lucas Moura came down and came round and shook all our hands. And when he was talking to myself and Charlie from The Athletic, he said it was quite nice. He said, I just want to thank you for all of your coverage, even when you were criticising me. I just thought that was really nice because I think he understood we've got a job to do. That's what we've got to do. When he plays well, we'll praise him. When he doesn't play well, we'll say that he didn't play well. It was a very nice moment, and he made a point of then going around to everyone that was kind of in the room, any journalist that was there, just saying essentially his goodbye. And he went up to the lovely lady on reception, who's always very kind and nice to us all. And I think the receptionist sometimes, because if you're not aware, the press conference happens on the academy admin side of the building, whereas the first team side is on the other. And I think sometimes receptionists and staff will swap and they'll go over and they'll work on that side. So clearly Lucas knew her very well, gave her a big hug, and he started crying. He's an emotional chap, is Lucas. And it was just very nice. It's... apparently he's been doing that, making a real point today of going around everyone I think he can in the building, just to say goodbye to everyone. Look, obviously people have their opinions on various views he has, I guess is the way to put it, especially back in his homeland. But what I would say is, taking only on face value and the dealings that I've had with him, he's always been a really interesting, good guy to us. And that's all I can kind of judge him on in that respect, is my own personal interaction with him. Not saying I condone any other views that he may have whatsoever. But what I would say is, just on a face-to-face basis, he's always been a very interesting person to interview. And yeah, he clearly cares about Spurs. I think that's what I would say, just on ending on Lucas, is it's a club that's meant a lot to him. The opposite to what we were saying about Mourinho. I think with Lucas, he clearly is very sad that it's come to this point, but probably he, like both sides, know that it is the right time, I think. And yeah, it was quite a classy way to kind of see off his time and making sure that he said goodbye to everyone. And what I said previously about the way he worked with the under-21s a lot in recent months, did this impromptu speech to them after their relegation. He'd sat on the floor in his kit, and he just kind of suddenly stood up after a couple of moments of contemplation and did what I understand from people within there was one of the most rousing, inspirational talks these young players have ever had, talking about how much he loves Spurs and how they should all view it as a real honour and a privilege and make the very most of their opportunity at the club. And a lot of those players, when he goes, they'll be better for what he did for them, even if I know, a lot of the fans turned against him in the last few weeks or so, or months maybe. But clearly he did have an impact at Spurs, and nothing more so than that incredible night in Amsterdam as well. So, I thought that was very nice. So Mason's presser, like I say, was really interesting. I'm going to give you some little bits and pieces from the press conference itself. I've got the transcript right in front of me, which I got. So injury news, if you weren't aware, Christian Romero is going to miss the end of the season. I don't know whether he has it in his contract that he kind of finishes seasons in the end of or the beginning of May, but unfortunately it seems to have been a little bit of a theme since he arrived at Spurs. So he's going to miss out. Mason told us. Højbjerg did train yesterday, so he's hopeful that he'll be fine for Sunday's game. So we may see the Højbjerg Bissouma midfield, maybe, unless if Skip's got something to say about it. I did think Skip played quite well against Brentford, just unfortunately just kind of had a bad end to the game, and that mistake that led to the third goal as well. But you'd think experience-wise he would probably go for Højbjerg and Bissouma in this kind of must-win game, I guess. What else did we get? He was asked about had the uncertainty around the new manager affected the squad, as in not knowing who the manager was. He said possibly, but it's quite interesting. He wasn't kind of pulling his punches when it came to the Conte era. And this was another element, a moment there where he said the results before he left weren't amazing. I don't think results have dipped a huge amount. Obviously, we're in a different position, but I think you could feel it. You could feel it in the weeks leading up to it that there was uncertainty, and it's never great to have that uncertainty. We've probably been in that situation for the last 8 weeks when there's a lot of uncertainty. There's uncertainty. This is why one of my main things when me and my team came in, I wanted to create a togetherness and make us feel part of something towards the end of the season, and hopefully to lay foundations to build where we hope and expect this football club and this football team to look and play like in the future. And that is one thing, I can't probably said this in previous videos, from when you talk to people around the club, Mason has made a difference in that respect. They feel the atmosphere within it, the departments feel closer together, and he has tried to, like I say, improve the culture, I guess. I don't know what's like in the middle of that. But but I just thought it was interesting, the whole Conte thing. I guess he's defending himself in a way and defending his record and kind of showing that this is a continuation rather than a it's all Ryan's fault thing. But and he was asked, in light of the Slot news, is Tottenham still an attractive proposition for a manager? He went, absolutely yes. And that was it. And I was like, I think it was the Sky journalist asked, and why? Could you elaborate? And he said, it's history. It is Tottenham Hotspur. It is a big club. Not just for managers or coaches, but for staff members, for players. Anyone here should feel the privilege and honour to represent the badge. If they don't, then they shouldn't be here. It's as simple as that. He's very, very strong when it comes to Spurs stuff, and his love for Spurs is very clear. It's difficult in terms of, I know a lot of the fan base are now cynical, and obviously we are as journalists as well. But I think had this come at a different time, had this been in peak Poch era and Poch had said that, I think everyone would be like, oh, it's amazing. And it's like, it's just now, obviously, because it doesn't feel like Spurs are amazing right now. It doesn't feel like Spurs are acting like a big club. So it kind of has this slightly hollow ring to it. But I do still think it's a very important thing. I do think it's, again, this is what I go back to earlier. The next manager needs to be someone that really feels like they're doing something important at this club, and then and it is a club that can be taken to the levels it was back in, the historic team it was, the double winning team, the first team, British team to win a European trophy. I know these were a long time ago, but could it be that team again? And it has to be someone that believes that that's what they can do in the long term as well. Yeah, that was an interesting one. I felt he was asked about Harry Kane and his impact if this were to be his last game at Spurs. And he was like, can you sum it up? And he was like, I can't sum it up because he's still our player. I think when you sum something up, it's a closed chapter and you speak about the past. That's certainly not the case for any manager, player, member of staff at this football club. And this was the interesting bit for me because he kind of started that off as if to say, well, who's saying he's leaving? But then he very clearly, and listen to this, for any player, manager, member of staff at this football club, when one leaves, it's important to have a succession plan in place. When people do leave, the next one comes in and the impact isn't so big. That's not just speaking about Harry, that's speaking about other players. Ultimately, in 10 years' time, Tottenham Hotspur Football Club is still going to be Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. For me, it's really important that there's an identity in all departments. And I found that was really interesting, that he went from Harry Kane into talking about a succession plan. So is he talking about a year's time? Is he talking about... I think we could agree that it doesn't ever have ever felt like there was an idea of who Spurs would probably get if Harry Kane did ever go. It was almost like Harry Kane or nothing. We're stuffed without him, which may be the case. But yeah, I just felt that was interesting that he used Harry Kane to go into that line of thinking as well. And actually, I followed that up a bit later because I wanted to ask him about that and, whether did he also very much mean this managerial thing? Should Conte have should there have been a succession line of succession in place? And he said, I didn't just say players, it's members of staff as well. If you want to be a successful football club on the pitch, then everyone working for the organisation within the football club has to be on board with what we are and who we are. I think that when you have an idea of that, when people leave, it's probably far easier to pick far easier to pick people to come in, and I think it makes it a lot more fluid and easy to plan for these type of things. I hope going forward that's definitely the case. And he's right. It's like what I was saying earlier about Brighton. If a Brighton manager goes, they don't get knocked back too quickly or too far because they know they have an idea in mind of managers that have similar vibe to them, philosophy that they can bring in and carry on what was done. And it's obviously a roaring success right now. I just found that really interesting. Eric Dyer, that was another thing. Obviously, if you're not aware, Eric Dyer had an operation on his groin earlier this week. It's been a problem, I understand, for him since the World Cup. He's been struggling through, playing on with it. And finally, the pain's just been too much. He's had to deal with it. It's one of those, look, I know what a lot of people's thoughts are on Eric Dyer. I would say there's a little bit of a vibe for me of what happened with Kieran Trippier in his final year. Kieran Trippier had a bad season. It was not a good season. He admitted it himself afterwards. His form was pretty poor throughout the season. But then only admitted to us months after he'd left for Atletico that he'd been playing with an injury the whole time, which hampered the way he could play. He picked it up in the World Cup. And he kind of admitted it himself, actually. He said, maybe I was a bit selfish, just wanting to play and not lose my place and have maybe the operation or whatever it was that he needed to get it fixed. I'm not saying that's the case with Dyer. It may be. Look, from what I understand, talking to players and agents and everything, that often is the feeling with a lot of players. Yeah, I've got this little niggling problem that's annoying me, but I want to get to the summer, have any operational treatment then, so then I've got the whole summer to recover and it doesn't impact my playing time. But you can't help but wonder, has Dyer's form dip coincided with it? Because look, I know what people have you believe, but Eric Dyer did start the season really well. He did, as he did last season. Actually, last season wasn't too bad a season for Dyer on the whole, really. But this season definitely started it well and pretty much coincided with him getting back in the England squad. His form went, and obviously has just been kind of getting worse and worse in recent weeks, and he ended up losing his place. But I do wonder how much the injury played its part in terms of his movement and what he could do. For a player who's obviously he's not the quickest. So when maybe you've got an injury and you become even slower, maybe. Look, I don't want to offer up excuses for him. It's down to him if he wants to offer that up as an excuse. I think I did ask Mason about that and whether it hampered him. He said, I'm not too sure, to be honest. These injuries, I've been a professional. I know what it's like. You have injuries that linger and are difficult. Maybe a slight change in training or a change in the way we wanted him to play and asking his body to do something different might have flared it up a bit. I'm not sure, but ultimately it's an injury that needed to be sorted, needed operating on, and I'm sure after this operation he'll come back stronger and better than what he was before. I asked him if there was any temptation for Dyer to have the operation early in the season. He said, no, I don't think so. I think it was a case of trying to get through it and manage it as much as possible. But at the moment, he certainly couldn't manage it, so that option was taken away. Dyer's going to be back in time for pre-season, and we should see what the future holds for him, and whether he is still a Tottenham player, whether having the injury sorts him out, makes him get back to this kind of narrative that Dyer's always been rubbish for Spurs is not true. He's had some very good years under Poch, whether it be in midfield or going back into the middle of a back three. He did have good years at Spurs. He just obviously has not progressed as much as people would like. The other thing that I asked Ryan Mason was about the transfer window. I said, look, I know that it's important. Obviously, you have to have that manager and director in football in first. But how much you just looking at it now? How much work do you feel that this squad needs to be competitive again? His answer was really good on that. He said, of course, I think there is work to be done because we have a big squad, a lot of players on loan and decisions to make. First of all, though, there is a lot of decisions to make about our current squad. That's probably the priority. However, I do think that the most important work is probably away from the transfer window right now because you need a manager in place. You need commitment. You need an idea to know where you go. You can't do transfer business without a manager because it might not fit his idea. At the moment, I believe we need an idea of what we want to do, who we want to be, and stick to it. Recruit people for that and ultimately recruit players for that. He spoke really well. He did. I asked him about how difficult is it to judge him on what he's done at Tottenham during this spell? Because obviously the first spell, when you look at it on paper, 4 wins out of 6 in the Premier League, he did okay. Whereas this one, obviously, results are not going to be as good. So I asked him, how do you judge you on this one? How do you judge yourself as well in terms of it's been a short time that you've had to do it, but for me, this is my opinion, which maybe led to the question, was that I feel with Mason, he's taken on a squad that is not set up for his tactics. Doesn't also have the personnel. He's had injuries to deal with. He's just come into a bit of a bad situation as well. So I asked him, and his answer was, look, I think people will naturally just look at results because that's the nature of the business. I get that. But at the same time, I think football people, certainly people inside the building and this football club, will know the work we've done. I've no doubt about that. I don't care how many years experience you've had to try to change so much in such a short space of time. It's difficult. I think, let's say for argument's sake, it's much easier to go from a back 4 to a back 5 as opposed to going from a back 5 to a back 4 when a team has been working that way for the best part of 2 seasons. But I'll be honest, it is what I believe in and I have to stay true to myself. Especially in this moment in time, we have a lot of injuries and we're quite limited in who we can pick, which has probably influenced some decisions as well. Ultimately, I come away from it with more belief. I trust my team, I trust my people, and I know the work we have done. It's... I thought he spoke well. There's a lot more. Honestly, have a little look at the transcript. It's on my Twitter account of everything he said. He was asked about... This was a good, actually. Charlie from The Athletic asked him. He's in that unique position where he can comment. There's a lot of people have said in recent weeks that maybe the players are unmanageable. Maybe the manager's job at Spurs is actually impossible. And his answer to that was really good as well. He said, my view is quite clear in terms of we've probably had 2 or 3 different styles of football in the last 2 or 3 years. And I don't think that it's good for any squad of players or for fans. For anyone, it's hard to become stable. And when you lose people, lose coaches, lose players, lose members of staff, the impact is huge if you keep going from different things. Like I say, going forward, it's really important. We see it in the Premier League. We see it across the leagues. I want people to know who Tottenham are, know what a Tottenham team looks like, and certainly know what a Tottenham player looks like. I thought that was really interesting. For people that say, oh, he's going to be a yes man, he's going to be a stooge, he's going to be whatever the words people use for these things, I actually think in these recent weeks he's kind of been quite critical about the way the club's run. And that, in the way the decisions that Daniel Levy have made. You've heard me say many times that Levy seems to have lurched from idea. And it's very much what Mason's saying. There's 2 or 3 different styles of football. And again, it does make it so difficult then if you're going to bring someone new in, because each time you bring someone new in with a different style, you are ripping up and starting again. And it does have this big impact, like he says, on the staff, on the players, on everyone, the fans. So yeah, I actually think for someone, he's very much kind of said things how they need to be. Look, he loves the club, so ultimately he's never going to criticise the club itself. But when it comes to Levy, while I don't think he's going to be as critical as people, he definitely is making it clear that mistakes have been made and they need to find their path and identity again. And yeah, I found that really interesting. There's more stuff to come from him that I can't talking about it yet, because the reason is because it's embargoed stuff, and by the time YouTube takes so long to publish these videos right now that I'm often doing them hours and hours before. So this will come out no doubt after we've got an embargo time for 10:30 tonight with some stuff that's coming out, and there's another load of embargo stuff for 10:30 tomorrow night. For those who wonder what embargo sections are and why, it's for the national newspapers to have something that goes into their papers the next day, and you're allowed to put it online at 10:30 the night before. So that's what it is. It's a bit of an old-fashioned thing for us that work in the digital web world only. I used to be a paper man. I was in the newspaper world for a long time, so I understand where it comes from. I'm not entirely sure how long it will last for in going forward, but it's something that is a long-standing thing as well. Yeah. So yeah, there's that. I was just trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, it's more to come. Keep an eye. I don't want to kind of tread on any things that might be coming next. And at the end of his presser, a bit like Lucas, we had a bit of a Ryan Mason shake a handathon. He came around and shook everyone's hand, presumably because he knows it may end up being his last. Well, probably is going to be his last pre-match press conference until he takes over next season from whoever gets booted out. No. My hope for Ryan Mason is actually that he doesn't stick around. And I know that sounds awful, but it comes from a good place in terms of I want him to go out there now and prove himself. I want him to go out there, maybe a championship club perhaps, go there and build his way up and come back to Spurs being able to say, look, that's what I've done. Look at what I've done. Because I think his dream is clearly to manage Tottenham Hotspur. And I really hope he does. I've never known a man that says this football club or the words Tottenham Hotspur so much as Ryan Mason, and I stand by it. I know some people don't want to hear it because I think I'm linking him with a Spurs job. I don't think he's going to get the Spurs job. I probably would go as far to say I don't know if he's entirely ready yet, but you never know if you give someone time. But what I would say is I think he's going to be a very talented young coach, and I think he's one that in a few years, I think a lot of people will be wanting to be Spurs manager. That's the way I'd look at it. So Leeds this weekend. I'm making my way up there for the final game of the season. Yes, I must admit, this is the first time I've ever wanted a season to come to an end, probably in a while. I just need that. I know I don't get time off really at all in terms of month off or anything, because that month I'll be writing about manager stuff, director of football stuff, transfer stuff after that. But I am really looking forward to the tour, really looking forward to getting out there to Australia, Thailand and Singapore, seeing all the brilliant fans out there. I've been to Singapore before with Spurs and it's amazing what the fans are like. I've been very fortunate, obviously, get to go on all these places. Korea last year, China, Shanghai went to, America as well, and some really excited to see if the fans are kind of as passionate as I'm sure they will be as those places I've been to before. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the fact that it'll be a fresh start, new manager, director of football. I'm hoping for lots of interviews. We get a lot of players on those tours. I want to now talk to all these new people coming in, have proper sit-downs with them. We want to talk to Levy. Of course we do. We want to talk to Daniel Levy. Whether he will grant it or not, I don't know. I think it would be, knowing who's going on that tour, it's not anyone that's going to stitch them up. It's not going to be anyone that's going to take stuff out of context. So if ever there was a time for Daniel Levy to sit down with a group of journalists and properly explain a lot of his decisions, this would be the time. You'll find out whether that ends up being the case or not. But yeah, Leeds first. hope everyone has a safe journey up there as well. If you see me on the train, do please say hello. It's going to be a long old day. It's not in Spurs' hands. They obviously have to hope that Villa don't get the win against Brighton at Villa Park. Spurs have to do their job first, whatever. And this is a Spurs side that has not won outside London since October last year. So they've got to go there and do something that they certainly haven't done for a long, long time. Just look, if you can do what they did in the first half against Brentford, you'll have a terrific match on our hands. If they don't, and they crumble under the noise, Elland Road is going to be noisy. My long-standing memory of Elland Road is my brother taking me there to watch Spurs get battered by Everton in the FA Cup. Was it semi-final? Klinsmann scored the consolation goal. I think it was 4-1. So, yeah. I've obviously seen Spurs, reported on Spurs winning there since, but yeah, unfortunately that's the one I'm always drawn back to. And he'd managed to get us all these really nice flights to and from. It was felt very posh back then as a kid, and ended up missing our flight back and having to get on a coach back with loads of Spurs fans, which, as you can imagine, after a semi-final defeat of that nature, was not the happiest coach in the world all the way back. But there you go. So yeah, off to Leeds. Hopefully better than that day. I try to think team-wise, maybe just Højbjerg back in. I probably wouldn't change too much from the team that you put out at the start for that first half against Brentford, because I think it was the right way to go. Just got to be able to adapt with the changes that happened in the match. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. Just thought I'd do this as an extra little video because of everything that had happened. Probably will do the next video Monday, late Monday after I finish work that day, and we'll chat about everything that happened on Sunday. And we'll look back a little bit on the season that was and what's to come. So, right, I'm going to head off now. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.